Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fusion 360 for FTC series. This is the 7th video in the series, and if you haven't watched the first 6 videos, I recommend you do so by clicking on the card in the corner. All the previous videos have been looking at creating geometry in the 2D dimension. Today we're going to finally be bringing stuff into the 3rd dimension, and we're going to be looking at 4 tools under the Create menu over here. So right now I'm outside of a sketch. I'll show you how to get here from a sketch in just a little bit, but what are the Create tools that we're going to be looking at today? So we're going to be looking at Extrude, Revolve, Sweep, and Loft. And all of these take a 2D input or multiple 2D inputs, and they create a 3D shape from that in different ways. So let's just figure out how do we get here from a sketch with the sketch that we have created. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a sketch, and we're just going to be looking at Extrude first. It's the most common one. It's the one that you're going to be using the most. It's for basic shapes. So I'm just going to create a circle here. We're on the XZ plane, so I'm looking down, and this is just going to be 50 millimeters in diameter. So now we have our sketch. How do we finish this sketch? How do we get out? You may have noticed this finish sketch button up here. If you go ahead and click that, you'll see that you're outside the sketch and you're back in the main menu area now. So if we can rotate the camera, we can see our sketch is there. So we're going to drop down the Create menu and we're going to choose Extrude. The shortcut is E, and it's also available here. So the first thing that the Extrude tool asks for is a profile. So this is a enclosed 3D sketch, enclosed geometry. So if you had a line, that would not work. So it's asking for an enclosed geometry. So we're going to pick this circle as our profile. And now you'll see that we get this angle indicator. Every time there's a circle with this sort of handle, that's an angle, and every time there's this blue arrow with these dots, that's a distance. So the first thing is just, if we did it very basically, we could just extend this up. And if you can click and drag, you can change the distance here, or you can change it here. So I'm going to make mine 50, and let's look at some other things that we can do here. So the first thing is the taper angle, and that's indicated by this here. So if we make this negative, the top profile is going to be smaller than the bottom profile, and this angle here that we've got, if we look from the side, that is a 20-degree slope, a negative 20-degree slope. This is also 110 degrees. So if we make this positive by dragging clockwise, you'll see that the top profile is larger than the bottom profile, and this would be a 15-degree slope off of 90. So that's how you use the taper angle. This can be used for countersunk screw heads. It can be used for many things. So if I just make this 0, we can look at the starting plane. So right now it's on profile plane. There's two other options you have. The from object requires another object, so if we need that, we'll look at that later. But really the only two that I usually use are profile plane and offset plane. So the profile plane starts it from the profile itself. It's starting it from here. If we pick offset plane, we can then specify the offset. So if I make this 10 millimeters, now we're starting the extrude 10 millimeters up from the profile plane. If I picked negative 10, it would start 10 millimeters below the profile plane. So I'm just going to put that back on profile plane for now. And let's look at the direction. So we have it on one side now, we're just extruding up. If you pick two sides, you'll extrude in two sides, and you can change the amount each side independently. And if you do symmetric, then it's the same for both. So if we go like this, we can do like 15 millimeters here. Now we're 50 millimeters up, 15 millimeters down. If we did symmetric, it would automatically do 15 down and 50 up. And you can change the measurement here. So if 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 I have it on 50 now, it's on half length, so it's going to do 50 up and 50 down for 100 total. But if you change this to whole length, it would do a 50 total, so 25 up, 25 down. I'm going to put this back on one side, and let's take a look at the extent. So the distance, that's just the one that we've been using. You specify how much it goes. If you did to object, and we had another object here, it would extend to that object. So I'll do a little demonstration. I'm going a little bit ahead, but if I used an offset plane, I'm creating a plane, and I made this 50 millimeters. And then I went back to the extrude by pressing E, and I did the to object, and I selected this plane as my object. It would extend up 50 millimeters because the distance between them is 50 millimeters. Now, you can do this by pressing distance and simply clicking on the object, but this will not update properly. So if I did this, I selected this, and I changed the distance of this plane by editing this feature and making it 60, you'll notice it's still at 50 millimeters. It hasn't changed with the plane. But if I use the to object feature and I went to the plane, and now I went OK, created the body, and I edited this plane and I made it 60 millimeters up, you'll notice that the object would update correctly. So these two can seem similar, just clicking on the object and doing to object, but they really aren't. So make sure you use the one that you need. And then for the extrude, this is basically it. The last thing that we need to look at is the operation, and we haven't talked about components or bodies yet, but for now, just leave this on new body, and we can talk about what these do briefly. If you do join and you already have a body, then it's going to join them together. If you do cut, then whenever you're extruding into a body, it's going to cut out the portion that you're extruding. And if you do intersect, it'll only leave the portion that's intersecting between the two bodies. You can play around with that. Just create some bodies and create some new sketches and just figure out what those tools do. So that's basically it for extrude. Next we're going to look at revolve. So I'm going to go ahead and get back to my sketch, and I'm going to get rid of this circle. Got rid of it, and now we're going to look at the revolve. So right now, what the revolve feature does is, actually I want to choose a different plane. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to choose the XY plane. What the revolve feature does is it revolves a sketch around an axis. So you can see what that does in a second, but what I want to do here is I want to create a cone with a 45-degree slope. So I'm going to create a triangle here like this, and this is going to be 45 degrees, and we're going to finish that up, and we're going to hit finish sketch, and we're going to click the revolve feature here. And again, it asks for a profile. It's automatically selected it, but you just select it by clicking here. And next it's asking for an axis, and this is the axis of rotation. So since this is the back point of our triangle, we could choose that. If we hid this sketch, we could also choose the origin line here, but choosing this is fine. And now you'll notice we have a cone created. And so what's this doing? It's taking this profile here and it's rotating it around and creating a solid body from that. The angle, it's just if you choose a value less, then it's going to do less revolving. And if we just put that back on 360, we can look at some of the other options here. If we do full, it's automatically going to do 360. And if you do 2, you have to have an object to select again. So if I had an object, if I had like a plane here, and I click 2, maybe we can see that by turning on the origin, and I click 2, it's going to do this much rotation, and that's going to obviously update properly if you change it. Let's just leave it on angle for now, and let's put this at 90, let's say, and let's look at some of the other options here. So if we have two sides it's the same, then you can choose two different angles. So we're doing 130 in this direction and 90 in this direction. If we do symmetric, then it's going to do 90 in both. And then finally we have the same things here. So everything is the same here. New body, new component, cut, intersect, join. Again, I encourage you to play around with using join, cut, and intersect. Next, we're going to look at the sweep. So I'm going to get back in my, I'm going to choose a new profile, a new plane for my sketch. I'm going to choose the XZ, and you'll see why in a bit. So I'm going to create myself a spline, just like this. Whatever, it's pretty good with me. And I'm just going to finish that up. So if we look now, we have this spline here. And this itself is not going to become the shape. It's instead going to define the path for the other shape that we're going to do. So I'm going to create another sketch, and I'm going to choose this plane this time. And I can see that the center point is the same for both. So if I create a circle here, I know that it's going to be on the same center point. And if we finish, we can take a look and you can see they're sharing that center point. So now if I use the sweep, it's asking for a profile like always, and this is going to be our profile. And next it's asking for a path. If I select this spline as my path, it's going to take this shape and it's going to move it along the path and join it all together. So we can take a look at some of the options that we have available to us. First is the chain selection. We looked at this before with the offset tool, I believe, and so it's the same thing. Either it selects all the lines that are touching each other in a chain, or it only selects the one that you've selected. So let's look at the distance. The distance is 1 by default. If you decrease this, it's going to become a value between 0 and 1, and that you can think of that as like a percentage, how much it's traveled. It can't go above 1 because there's no path after that to define where it's going. So the taper angle, it's going to change the size of the end thing and interpolate smoothly. So if we do, oh, that's way too big, sorry. If we do maybe something like 0.5, 0.3, it's hard to see in this example, but you can maybe see that it's getting larger over time. And if we did a negative value, you could see that it's getting smaller as it goes along the path. So that's just how you use that. And the taper angle, or I mean the twist angle, we're going to have a different example for, which I'll show in a bit, since it's hard to see with the circle. But let's look at the orientation. So right now, the orientation, it's rotating with the path. So if you divide this up into a bunch of different slices, it's rotating with the path. If we did parallel, it's not rotating with the path, and instead the orientation is the same as where it started from. So you can see it's going like this, and then here it gets super thin because it's not going on the path as much. So you just choose whichever one you need in the different instance. Again, same tools here. So I'm going to cancel this for now, and let's take a look at the twist angle. So I'm going to delete my circle, and I'm going to create a center rectangle instead. And this will be very easy to see the twist angle. So I'm going to finish the sketch, and I'm going to drop down to the sweep and select this and select our path again. And now we can see that we've got the rectangular sort of thing. So let's take a look at the twist angle. So if I change the twist angle, what it's going to do is it's going to change the orientation of this end face, and it's going to interpolate between the first face and the end face. So if I made this 45 degrees, you could see that it's now twisted 45 degrees on the end, and throughout the whole path it's twisting towards the end. So that just creates a twist in the path. That's all for the sweep. Next, let's take a look at the loft. And what the loft tool does is I'm going to get rid of all of our sketches, go back to the beginning, and I'm going to create a new sketch here. And what the loft tool does is it interpolates between two sketch profiles. So we have to get a little bit ahead of ourselves to demonstrate it here, but I'm going to create a circle for my bottom profile, and then I'm going to use the offset plane tool again. Don't worry about this, we'll cover this later. Just creating a plane that's 5 millimeters above this one. And next I'm going to create a sketch on this plane, and I'm going to create a center rectangle like this. And let's take a look at the loft tool. So now we have two sketch profiles and we want to connect them. So we're going to use the loft tool, and it takes two profiles like this. And now you'll notice that it's taking the circle and it's taking the rectangle, and it's creating intermediate shape that connects them and makes it so it looks like it's transitioning between a circle and a rectangle smoothly. So these points here, which we can drag around with the hand icon, this just tells the it tells the shape how to behave basically, and by dragging these points, we're changing the shape of the shape. So really, there's a lot of options here, but probably the only thing that you're going to need is this operation down here. Maybe dragging these handles around, and chain selection and tangent engines versus keep. And so for this one, it's just going to smooth things out instead of keeping the hard lines. So it's up to you which one you want. I really don't use this feature that much, but there's definitely a lot of times where it could be really useful, but you really don't need to play around with these settings too much. So that's it for the loft, and that is going to conclude it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the other create tools inside Fusion 360. We're going to be taking a look at the rib, the web, the hole, the thread, the pattern tools, and the thicken tools. And that's going to conclude it for the create menu, and then we're going to do some more work on our screw and nut. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.